And welcome back to our interviews with the final 5 candidates. Coming up, we're going to hear from Secretary Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, a senator from Vermont. We're also going to hear from Donald Trump coming up in just a few minutes. But let's get some quick thoughts from our panel. So far, we've heard from Governor Kasich. We've also heard from Senator Ted Cruz. Gloria?
Well, I think neither of these guys are getting out anytime soon. And, you know, Kasich believes he's the most electable. Doesn't sound like Cruz actually wants to be on the ticket with Donald Trump when Wolf was talking to him
and
about
Kasich,
that.
too, doesn't
Kasich, well, and these things can change, you know, of course. But Cruz in particular seemed to be really belittling Donald Trump's grasp of foreign policy. Tremendously.
It's interesting, John King, because Cruz is much more willing to go after Donald Trump than John Kasich is.
Yes, Kasich has decided I'm going to be the nice guy here, and I'm going to somehow try to parlay my Ohio win into more delegates. Tell me where he's going to win. They do hope when the schedule's west this week, Arizona, which is winner take all. Trump is favored. If he gets those, his path continues. Utah could be the most important state, whether Ted Cruz can get above 50%. If you get above 50%, you get all those delegates. Kasich is waiting on Pennsylvania. He says he'll make a play in Wisconsin, which is on the 5th, so 3 weeks from now, right? 2 weeks from Tuesday. Where's he going to win? I don't know. But they all seem to hope. They all keep hoping for this moment, and they're hoping this meeting of AIPAC, all of the candidates except Senator Sanders are here, the pro-Israel group AIPAC. They all hope that there's this moment where suddenly people say Donald Trump's not up to it. He's not ready for it.
Hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet.
Nia?
No, and I mean, you look at our poll, and for instance, 70% say, listen, Kasich should probably drop out of this race. And you also just look at the trajectory. Donald Trump, something at like 12% in June. He's at like 47% now. And all along the way, they've had this hope and dream and plan that he would implode or that something would happen, that the anti-Trump or never-Trump movement would work, and it never has.
Right.
Yeah, and I was actually at AIPAC this afternoon, and there's no question John Kasich gave a very rousing speech. He had the entire place, which was tens of thousands of people on their feet applauding. He gave a speech really like I haven't seen before, and Donald Trump did as well. And the whole room was
Donald Trump actually gave a speech.
He gave a speech
From a
with teleprompter,
teleprompter.
and the room sort of didn't know what to do with it because that was not the Donald Trump that they were used to seeing on their televisions for 6 months. But one thing I will say about what John Kasich said to you was about the fact that he firmly believes that once he gets to the convention floor, if there is no nominee, that the delegates will turn around and look at the poll that you just showed, that he is the most electable, and that's why he's going to just buckle in and wait till he gets to.
Coming up next, the Republican frontrunner weighs in. Donald Trump joins us here in the CNN Election Center. That interview right after this quick break.
We're back with our CNN election special. We've just heard from all 5 of the remaining presidential candidates. Right now, we have brand new numbers from our just released CNN poll. Donald Trump holding a commanding 16-point lead over his closest competitor, Ted Cruz. Trump is a whopping 30 points ahead of his other Republican opponent, John Kasich. But will Trump get the nomination? 60% of Republicans want the party to choose the candidate with the most support in the primary season if no one has the 1,237 delegates needed to win. Whoever gets the nomination will face a daunting task to bring the GOP together. 46% of Republicans, nearly half, believe the party still will be seriously divided in November. In the Democratic race, Hillary Clinton has a 7-point advantage over Bernie Sanders in our new national poll. But Sanders does better than Clinton in matchups against the Republican candidates. Take a look. Clinton has a 12-point edge over Trump when they go head-to-head in our new poll. But look at this. Sanders beats Trump by a 20-point margin. Let's go back to Anderson.
Fascinating to see those numbers. I'm here with our panel. Let's talk about some of the things that we heard tonight. Wolf asked Donald Trump about his remarks about the possibility of his supporters rioting if he doesn't get the nomination at the convention. Let's watch what he said.
You don't want any violence to emerge, right?
Of course I don't. They say it all the time.
Because you used the word riots twice.
I didn't use. I said very simply, if that happened, I'll have no part in it. But there could very well be riots, and you know that's true. I mean, are we supposed to be so politically correct?
I just want you to.
Wolf, are we supposed to be so politically correct that we're not allowed? I have people, millions and millions of people that have come out. It's the biggest story in world politics today. Are the number of people that came out? I mean, these people are by the millions. And you see what's happening with the Republicans, and they're not coming for other people.
So I just want to be precise. Will you unequivocally say to your supporters, you don't want any violence, you don't want any riots at the convention?
Of course I would, 100%. But I have no control over the people.
Donald Trump talking. Gloria, what do you make of nothing really new from Donald Trump on that front, although kind of walking back, I guess, the comments he made certainly off the cuff about riots?
Yeah, I think, he turned it into an issue of political correctness, which is the way he answers a lot of questions and sort of gets around directly answering it, because he did use the word riots. I mean, the thing that was most stunning to me in Wolf's interview with Trump was the question of NATO and how he feels we put too much money into NATO, and maybe we ought to reconsider that. I think all of our NATO allies, and perhaps Putin, were a little surprised at that. And you heard Ted Cruz earlier this evening say that he felt it was just stunning.
Well, John Kasich also saying he wouldn't say that. A leader not as direct against Trump on that, and certainly Hillary Clinton saying that as well.
Trump did say, I believe it was a New Day interview, he did say there would be riots. And he angered again or rattled again the Republican leadership, which wants him to realize when he speaks, whether he means it or not, his followers take cues from a leader. Followers take cues from the leader, and they want him to say, my people will be mad. My people will view this as an injustice. My people think I deserve the nomination. That's all fine. There will be riots. Mr. Trump needs to dial that back, and he seemed to get that and be trying to do it in degrees there. But he also talked at length in that interview about his argument that if I get close, if I get 11-something and the other guy's at 5-something, then you can't take it away from me, not after all these people have voted for me. And you can see that he is preparing to make that case, not just to the Rules Committee, not just to the Republican establishment leadership, but to the American people and to his voters, because he understands the moment we're at in the election. If he wins in Arizona, if he gets some delegates out of Utah, then Wisconsin on the 5th becomes a huge contest. If Trump wins again there, not only will it be, he'll have a chance to get the magic number, but even if he doesn't, if he does well in Wisconsin and wins in Arizona, it'll be clear that he's going to be the leader in delegates when you get to the convention.
Yeah, and you saw him today doing something very much like most politicians do, which was use a teleprompter during his apex speech.
Right, a speech that I assume somebody wrote.
Yes.
That's the first time we've heard him actually give a speech.
They actually sent out prepared remarks for this speech, something I'd never gotten to my inbox before. So you do see him doing that. You saw him meeting with some other Republicans today, none of the leaders really. But even in today, when Gloria mentioned NATO, I mean, that gets at what he's trying to do here. He is really turning a lot of the conservative, sort of orthodoxy, Republican Party orthodoxy in terms of foreign policy on its head. When he talks about NATO, he really is kind of borrowing in some ways from Ron and Rand Paul, who had a very much more a libertarian idea about American sort of adventurism. Anti-interventionist. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you saw sort of 2 or 3 or 4 faces of Donald Trump today in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question in my mind that the NATO issue, what he said to Wolf, is going to be rippling through not just Washington, but as Gloria said, through the entire globe. Because it's one thing to be anti-interventionist or isolationist and to make clear, as he has it all of our debates and everywhere else, that he thinks that the United States is the policeman around the world, spending too much of its resources, which should be used for roads and bridges and things here. But it's another thing to suggest that we're not going to pay our dues on an incredibly important alliance around the globe.
Particularly at a time of a resurgent Russia. Let's actually play what he said about NATO just for those who didn't hear it.
Do you think the United States needs to rethink U.S. involvement in NATO?
Yes, because it's costing us too much money. And frankly, they have to put up more money. They're going to have to put some up also. We're paying disproportionately. It's too much. And frankly, it's a different world than it was when we originally conceived of the idea and everybody got together. I think we have to reconsider, keep NATO, but maybe we have to pay a lot less toward the NATO itself.
It also, Anderson, it plays into this whole question of, Rand Paul question of foreign aid.
Yeah.
Right. People who believe we spend too much money on foreign aid, which I think is 4% of the budget, and up to 4% now.
It's not a huge surprise for Trump to say this. I mean, he said this before about U.S. forces in, on the DMZ in South Korea.
But he's also talked about putting ground troops, 20 to 30,000 ground troops, if he needs to combat ISIS. So which is it, right?
One of the issues here, and sometimes this is our translation issue. I'm not defending everything Mr. Trump says, and some of what he says is quite controversial, but some of it is how he speaks. He does not speak in the language of somebody like a a United States senator or somebody who's been a member of a past administration when it comes to foreign policy. The role of NATO has been a huge debate since the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was a big debate when I covered the White House in the Bill Clinton administration. It was a big debate when I covered the White House in the George W. Bush administration. What is NATO's job now that there is no Soviet Union? So Mr. Trump's dead right in saying there's a global conversation about what is NATO's role. But when the person who would be the president of the United States, the head, essentially the head of the big superpower, the big country not in charge of NATO, but the leading power in NATO says, well, just, we're going to pay less. You guys have to do more. It's just the language, but that's Trump.
But the other thing I think we should keep in mind is that this is why people out there really like him.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because it is the populist message. It's, they're listening to all of us talking about global alliances and what it means on a geopolitical basis, but they want to know why our taxpayer dollars is going abroad and instead of being here, and that's the bottom line for them.
We heard from a lot more candidates tonight. We'll have much more of our election special, the Final Five, ahead.
Senator John King is with me at the Magic Wall right now. Tomorrow night, there's some pretty important contests. We're looking closely at these states.
We're going to learn, can Bernie Sanders come back? We're going to learn, can the Stop Trump movement actually beat him at the ballot box? Let's take a quick look. Primary, first up is tomorrow night, March 22. We call it Western Tuesday. 3 states on the Democratic side that's part of the next few weeks, Wolf, that will award 360, just shy of 360 Democratic delegates. But we'll get to the delegates of tomorrow night in a second. On the Republican side, over the next month, if you're going to stop Donald Trump, this is the period to do it, and it would start in Arizona and Utah if you can. Then it's Wisconsin, and we move on with New York a month from now. So that's the state of play coming up. Let's take a look at the delegate race and take a look. Let's start first on the Democratic side. Here's the issue for Bernie Sanders. Secretary Clinton starts with a pretty healthy lead. These are just pledge delegates. She also has a lot of super delegates. Well, let's just focus on the pledge delegates for now. She starts with a pretty healthy lead. Tomorrow, Bernie Sanders could run the board. He could win all 3 contests. Even if he did, this is 55-45, Wolf, he would just cut ever so slightly into Clinton's lead. Proportional rules on the Democratic side. And Secretary Clinton actually thinks she's going to win in Arizona. Let's just hypothetical do it this way. If Clinton wins 1 and Sanders wins 2, it's essentially a draw is what happens. He picks up the delegates, a little bit more of the delegates here. She picks up a little bit more there, and they extend out. That's the big challenge for Bernie Sanders. After tomorrow night, there's some states favorable to him, 2 out in the West, but he has to win by huge margins. He has to be winning 70-30, 75-25 to start to change the delegate math. But let's watch. The calendar is moving his way. Now let's look at the Republican side, and here's where we start. Again, Mr. Trump is past the halfway mark. Ted Cruz says, I'm the only alternative, but he's way back. And Ted Cruz, remember, went 0 for 5 last week. Right? John Kasich won in Ohio. Donald Trump won the other 4. So if Ted Cruz is going to prove himself to the Stop Trump movement as their horse, if you will, tomorrow's the chance to do it. If you fill in the map here, I just filled in the map all the way through a bunch of contests here because I just wanted to show this to you. Let's assume Donald Trump wins Arizona tomorrow and Cruz wins Utah. Then if you say Cruz is successful in the West, but Trump is more successful here in the Northeast, you give John Kasich Delaware. Look how Trump, this sets you up for the California primary. Look how far out Trump can get if he keeps winning. So it is imperative, if Ted Cruz wants to get back in this game, it's really imperative that he change the psychology of the race out here in the West by something like Arizona. Then maybe this will not end up like this. But at some point, Wolf, if you're going to stop Donald Trump, you have to change this math. Again, if you come back to where we are now and you just look at what could happen tomorrow, if Trump takes Arizona, it's winner take all. So if he just gets those 58 right there, and if you go into Utah, if it's a split, let's say Cruz wins, but Donald Trump comes in second and John Kasich comes in third, or even if Donald Trump comes in third, you give him just a few out of that. If he picks up 10, he keeps the march going. That is the challenge.
If Cruz gets 50%, he gets it all.
If you get 50%, you get it all, which is why Cruz has been complaining about Governor Kasich being out there, saying, why are you campaigning here? Why don't you cede me this state? Let me beat Donald Trump and take all the delegates. But Kasich's point is, I know that's not enough. I have to prove to people I'm still amassing delegates. So Kasich hopes to pull some delegates out of Utah, and then Wisconsin would become the huge battleground on the 5th. And again, if Donald Trump wins here again, at some point you got to stop him. You can't just stop him by meetings. You can't just stop him by running millions of dollars of ads. If he wins again, when you get back to the territory in the Midwest, with the exception of Ohio, Kasich's home state, look how favorable this has been to Donald Trump. So we're out west for a couple days. Then we come back here. If Donald Trump, if you're going to stop him, you better stop his momentum there, because if he picks up Arizona and then wins the next contest in Wisconsin, are we going to get to an open convention? Maybe. Can he clinch by the time he gets there? Maybe. But to his point in his interview with you, what are you going to do if Donald Trump is somewhere out here and you get to the convention and you're going to say, this guy? I mean, the rules are the Republicans are right saying the rules are the rules, but if he gets way out there, or depending on how big, let's say Donald Trump pulled this far ahead, you could have a California primary, put him right there if he ran the board in California. pretty impossible to tell that guy he's not going to be the nominee.
Yeah, especially if he's got 3 or 4 million more votes
Right.
as opposed to the delegates. It's going to be tough. All right, stand by. Anderson, back to you.
Well, when I talked to John Kasich earlier, John, he's clearly putting his hopes in an open convention, and he makes the argument that he's the strongest Republican in a general election matchup. Let's take a look at what he said. There's a new CNN poll out tonight. Good news and bad news for you. The good news, do you like good news first or bad news first?
Whatever you want, Anderson.
All right.
You choose.
I'm a bad news first guy, but
Okay.
I'm a catastrophist. But I'll give you the good news first. You're the only Republican that beats Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup, 51% to 45%. 70% of Republicans, though, think you should drop out because it's impossible for you to win enough delegates to be the party's nominee.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to have enough delegates to win the nomination before the convention.
Those
So-
70% of Republicans who say you should drop out, you say...
Well, I don't know who they are, and look, all these polls. I mean, people have been telling me all along what the polls are, and the pundits tell me what's going to happen, and they've never been right yet. I think God created pundits to make astrologers look accurate, to tell you the truth. But,
And to fill cable news
but look,
time.
let me just tell you that I'm moving forward because I have the skill, the experience, the vision, and the record to fix the country. That, really matters. And then we're going to get to a convention, and delegates are going to think about 2 things. Who can win? I'm the only one that can win a general election.
Does that argument, Gloria Borger, does that hold up? That get to an open convention and delegates will start to look around to see who can win in a general election?
Well, not if you look to our poll tonight, which actually says that Republicans don't think that's the way it should work. 6 out of 10 Republicans say that the candidate with the most support going into the convention should get the nomination. And if the delegates are going to listen to the voters, that's not the way it's going to work. We just don't know. And this is what the campaigns are doing right now. They're all talking to people who could be delegates, want to know where their loyalty is after a first ballot, where they're bound, and then whether they would say, if you're Trump's people, they're talking to delegates trying to find out, would you be with us on the second ballot? Kasich's hope is that everybody would be freed up and somehow miraculously they would all decide that John Kasich is just so much better in a general election matchup against Hillary Clinton that they would all run to him. I don't think it's going to work that way.
I interviewed Reince Priebus on Sunday. Was that yesterday?
The
The head of the RNC, and asked him just that concept, just conceptually, whether he thinks that it is the voters going through the primary and caucus process who should decide, or it is the delegates on the floor, because, in recent history, in the past, 20 years, it has been the voters. Before that, as John Kasich likes to remind everybody, he was there in 1976 when it was the delegates. He suggested it's the party and it's the delegates, but good luck with that.
Right.
If there genuinely is a feeling that there's some backroom deal and that the front runner gets robbed, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder where all those Trump voters go. I mean, even if he doesn't, if the nomination is sort of wrestled from him, he doesn't quite form a third party because he can't get on the ballots. He sort of is a third party anyway in some ways, because what do his voters do?
But there is this, his voters are not necessarily the same as the delegates, which is
Right,
the fascinating
not at
issue.
all.
There's this wonderful, it's a spy novel. There are spy games going on right now because a lot of these delegates, if you go to conventions over the years, it's the same people. It's the party activists, and they know how to become delegates. Now, they're bound. There will be delegates at the convention who are bound to vote for Trump on the first ballot because their state voted for Trump in the primary. But they're not Trump supporters. They're just Republican activists who know how to become delegates. And so the campaigns are all working them, saying, okay, Anderson, I know you need to vote for Donald Trump on the first ballot, but if there's a second ballot, you don't want Trump.
And that's already going on.
Well,
Those conversations.
the Cruz campaign is definitely
Yeah.
working it. I'm not
Trump
sure.
is. Trump is.
Yeah,
Trump has started to work it through because
But
he
Ted
understands,
Cruz has gotta-
and the Kasich
Yeah.
people are trying to put it together, but they don't have the big operation.
Right.
So to the Kasich's point, sure, if there's compelling polling at the convention and we're on a second or third ballot that he beats Hillary Clinton, he'll have a case to make, but you need momentum coming into
But
the
it's interesting
convention.
because Donald Trump is not running a conventional campaign. He doesn't have the kind of campaign staff that I think even a Ted Cruz probably has.
Right.
Is he hiring up people? to do
Look at the
this?
meeting he went to today. One of the guys who showed up, there's a lot of conversation, was Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker.
Right.
But a lot of people who see Newt Gingrich trying to make friends with Mr. Trump, and one of the things he's trying to do is say, I know the rules. You don't. You need my help. There's a lot of watch what's going on. There's a lot of the people who think it's going to be Trump, not just Speaker Gingrich. A lot of people
And
think
some
it could be
of-
Trump
yeah.
or cozying up.
But
if
some
you
of
look-
Carson's people have moved over there too, who kind of know.
And
the
if you look
process
at our
well.
polling, in our poll, the voters would be very enthusiastic if Ted Cruz became the nominee. Even some of those Trump voters. So he's clearly their sort of top second.
Our CNN election special, the final 5 candidates, continues. Much more after this quick break. And welcome back to the Final 5, our election special. You've heard from all 5 final presidential candidates, Republicans and Democrats, tonight. I want to play 2 kind of bites back to back. One from Secretary Clinton, one from Ted Cruz, both talking about Donald Trump and maybe perhaps telegraphing some of the ways, if they reach a general election, they'll push back against him. Let's listen. You're saying he's a bully, though.
Well, I think his behavior certainly qualifies for that. I think his incitement of violence, his constant urging on of his supporters in large numbers to go after protesters, his saying, I want to punch people in the face, and telling somebody who did punch somebody, I will pay your legal bills. I think that raises very serious questions.
Donald's campaign, his entire campaign is built on a lie. I understand the people who are supporting
What's the lie?
Well, let me explain. I understand the people who are supporting Donald. They're frustrated with Washington, with politicians in both parties that have been lying to us, that make promises, and they go to Washington and they do the exact opposite of what they said. But if you're fed up with Washington, with the corruption of Washington, then it doesn't make any sense to support Donald Trump, who has been enmeshed in the corruption of Washington. The lie behind Donald's campaign is that he will stand up to Washington. He is the system. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are flip sides of the same coin.
Ted Cruz talking about, in response to Donald Trump, calling him Lion Ted repeatedly over and over again. But clearly, I mean, Hillary Clinton's team, it seems, I mean, they must already be doing opposition research. They must already be looking for how they are going to go after Donald Trump, assuming he is the nominee and assuming she's the nominee.
And, you know, bully is a buzzword, obviously, that she will continue to use. She will use because clearly it's aimed at women. And, I mean, also men, but largely women. Hillary Clinton needs to increase her wins with women, and if she's going to have a gap with white men. And I think that they're going to attack him on that front every way they can. You've already seen the ads from the Stop Trump movement on the things he has said about women. Hillary Clinton started this campaign by running as a woman, then she kind of stopped. Now, I think if she finds herself in a race against Donald Trump, you're going to see her talking a lot.
I asked her about why she's not doing well among white men.
Yeah.
She didn't really have an answer. I mean, she claims she hasn't really looked deep into the data, which I find that hard to believe.
Right.
But she didn't really seem to acknowledge it in any way or admit it.
No. You know, and frankly, that's, I think, part of the rap on her. That instead of saying, you know what, I'm not really sure, and I got to work harder with that group of people, and you got to see what's going on. It was, well, I'm not really sure, and we're doing well, and we have an overall bigger number than Donald Trump, so on and so forth.
And I want everybody I want to appeal to everybody.
Yeah, and it was one of those, you gave her an opening to have kind of a human moment, and it didn't happen. But I did think that the way that you asked that question about how she would campaign against Donald Trump was fascinating, because, look, she, like everybody else running, is a conventional politician. And it's unconventional warfare for him, and it's going to be very, very tricky.
She has had the benefit, though, and as Sanders has as well, of seeing what did not work for GOP candidates.
That's true.
That's right, and they want to do what they feel like the GOP didn't do, which was to really dump out the opposition book on him, to essentially say, you don't want this guy with the nuclear football because of his temperament, and also, by the way, he doesn't know what the nuclear triad is as well. So I think that's what you saw tonight. I do think it's interesting. She has got to be careful with calling Donald Trump a sexist. We remember what happened when she did that before. I thought she was very careful not to do that tonight. I think the bullying thing is a way. Yeah, I think the bullying thing is a way to kind of get at that, but not say the word sexist.
The pro-Hillary super PAC Priorities USA started an anti-Trump ad this week, and it's kind of funny. It's a twist on something Trump said on Instagram about Hillary Clinton, but they're doing it on purpose. To Nia's point, they think the Republicans underestimated him for too long, so they're testing things. They're going to run a bunch of different ads, and you're going to see some of them. You're going to say, why are they doing this? They're not doing it to move votes right now. They're doing it to see how people react to it, to test themes that might work in the general election. But to your point, and to the point Dana made, I think all of these other candidates could learn from Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Even if you completely disagree with their positions, they talk to voters. They don't talk to reporters, and they don't talk to the Washington class. When you ask them a question, they talk to people. They tell a human story, or they tap a human anxiety. They don't go, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll get their vote someday.
And they do it in a way that seems authentic,
right.
Certainly to their supporters.
No.
Make sure to join us Tuesday night in the CNN Election Center for Western Tuesday, when we're going to bring you results from Idaho, Arizona, and Utah. Our coverage continues right after this.